What's up, Super Saiyan gods and goddesses? I'm your host, Real, and welcome back to Super Saiyan Smite podcast. Today's guest, IcyCold, a deity rank player, content creator, and coach. Icy, we're diving into your approach to coaching, creative processes for content creation, and how well you view the current state of Smite from a learning perspective. That being said, why don't you introduce yourself?
Anyway, anyway, hey guys, uh, don't really know what to say. I just
Tell us like who you are and kind of what you do from a little bit deeper perspective than like what I just said. I might have said everything almost.
yeah, you pretty much covered what it is I do. Yes, s- so I just make videos on matches that I think are pretty good and fun, and then I just upload them.
Okay. Um, well, do you have a philosophy, so to speak, or like a defined set of like principles that guide your approach to coaching or like teaching in your videos?
Uh, yeah, pretty much just tell players the fundamentals of each role as well as for like specific fights. I tell them how to like combo properly, how they should approach the fight before it happens, and how they should just farm and play the map. Just whatever information that I can give them that uh, from things that from things that I would do if I was in their position. Then I just tell them.
Right.
Usually, and in very great detail though.
In great detail, you said.
Yeah, because my sessions take quite a while just because I just kind of info dump.
Right. I mean, it's kind of hard not to. Whenever you're talking to people, I understand that much. Are there any specific habits that kind of hold back rank players? You think?
Yeah, there's a few of them. One is that so many ranked players just constantly fight, and when I say fight, they just always look to PvP and try to get the best KDA possible. Now that's fun and all, but Smite isn't Call of Duty. If you want to win games, you have to kill the Titan, and the way you do it is is however you see fit.
Um, yeah, it's definitely not Call of Duty. I I used to say like all the time whenever someone would like go like pop off and have like 20 or something kills, and I was like, bro was playing Call of Duty. But yeah, it's definitely
Yeah, for sure.
a lot more to it than just killing people, of course. And I think a lot of like um, self control whenever it comes to like playing is hard, and I mean I even fall into that category sometimes. So what's the first thing that you might ask someone whenever you start to teach them?
Well, usually the things that I ask, uh, which, well, usually the things that I ask of them before the session starts is to just make sure that the match that they send me is not one that's a complete stomp on either side, and I just tell them. It, then when the session starts, I just at first it's talk about the team's drafts and how they should like ideally play it out. and as well as to take a look at their HUD and see if they have the map centered or not.
Okay, so centering the map on their screen, I also have my map fairly centered, and I make it like bigger, so that way you can kind of see what's going on, like as like a, I mean some people like like playing like Call of Duty, like the map's always like over here, and like I don't know if there was ever a way to like change that, but since like Smite you can like overlay it and like make it like behind or like in front of everything. I think it's very valuable. And as far as I lost my train of thought. Um, and then just making sure that they. Wow, I am blanking tonight. I must not have gotten enough sleep. Um, yeah, and then um, just making sure all the information from the match that you like asked for up front to double check like that it was a good matchup, and then b like uh, lay out like how the match should play out. Is that what you said basically, or how you should
No,
play
not
this matchup?
no, not how the match should play out, because that will only happen in the best competitive games. But just more so tell them how they should approach the match just based off both team
Okay,
comps.
so like you okay like team comps, then you're like your lane opponent.
Hmm.
Okay. And then I already asked that. What's the most common mistake players still make in Smite 2 compared to Smite 1? I'm guessing that would still fall along the lines of um, just too much fighting, or is there anything else maybe?
Yeah, this kind of ties in with all the fighting that people love to do, and that is, if you're fighting too much, you're not farming enough, and
Hmm.
farm is very important. And there are so many games where when I would rank up from from gold to grandmaster back in Smite 1, when I would play through the gold and the plat lobbies, there were so many random team fights happening in the mid lane. They were just playing like 5v5
Hmm.
like 5 versus 5 arena in the mid lane. So it was basically them playing assaults, and no one's pushing up, no one's pushing down. It's like fighting in the it's like fighting in the trenches.
Yeah.
So the way that I would play the matchup was just farm the entire rest of the map, get a huge lead, start speed pushing. Once it's, once somebody comes to stop me, I'm like 5 levels ahead. I I beat them up. I keep pushing until more of the team shows up. Then I just play for objectives and just win the game easy.
Okay.
So
And
just farm, win when you can.
right. And especially in Smite 2 because there's, an abundance of farm compared to Smite 1. And like farming is definitely
Oh
still
yeah.
important in Smite 1. Smite 2 like there's just so much. So that's why you see like some of these players like just split pushing that we've heard about in recent Smite 2 times. Um, I'm not going to name drop. Do you think um Uh, I don't really like this question. I'm gonna skip this and go to the next. What does a perfect conquest game look to you right now? Yeah. What does a perfect conquest game look to you right now?
Well, there's no such thing as a perfect conquest game. The closest to how conquest should be played out is what you see in my prime tournaments, and as well as all the SPL World Finals. But in ranked, ideally, the best conquest games sh- should be found at the highest like deity lobbies, where
Mm-hmm.
people like actually trying their best and like warding everywhere and stuff. Sadly, with the well, with the current state of the game, a lot of the old competitive players aren't playing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The so since so many top level players quit, there's a lot of
Matchmaking issues.
yes, there's lots of matchmaking issues, and since there's nothing to play for, the guys who are still left don't take the rank seriously anymore.
Yeah.
So nobody awards, nobody really pays attention. There's some players even trolling.
I mean, which should make
So
good
yeah.
players easier to kind of scale up to the top, I would assume, just a little bit.
Hmm.
But are there any differences from your approach to coaching from Smite 1 compared to Smite 2? Or did you recently start coaching? I wasn't sure if you did much coaching in Smite 1.
I did some like before the open beta came out,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a huge difference with how well back in June of 2024 in Smite 1 they reverted the 9.5 durability patch that was in the game for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and when they removed that, all the base protections, the base health uh, from every single character was reduced, which meant that you can actually punish people uh, for their bad positioning
Yeah.
in the early game. You can actually kill people in the early game, whereas in Smite 2, you can't really do that as many characters
Yeah.
because because it's the exact same situation as it was in Smite 1 for a while. So when I teach someone in Smite 1, there's way more kill opportunities that they can go for.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Smite 2, I have to tell them to like farm for the power spikes to then finally be able to kill somebody. So so Smite 2 is basically telling them to farm until they're strong, and Smite 1 it, it, it's just telling them to farm, and if somebody steps up too much, you just kill them easy.
Right. Yeah. And I was talking about this the other day with someone, and like it is extremely like uh like level one. Like if you hit someone in a wave, you're going to die to the minions. Just about like you'll be 1 HP. In Smite 2, you don't really have that. Like that change was so drastic, and like you didn't really realize how drastic it was until they reverted it. And I was like, oh my, we used to play Smite like this, like so much more like careful.
Mm-hmm.
It gave so much more like it just made the game like extremely like I mean easier. Like I guess you get away with so much more stuff. Yeah, but that makes sense. Yeah, farm for your power spikes in Smite 2 because like the power spikes are there. They're just it's just not easy. Like it's not easy to kill people level 1. Like it's not. Like you have to really fight for it.
Yeah, that durability makes people get through the early game much easier than they would otherwise in Smite 1.
Right. Um I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but what kind of motivated you to start creating content or coaching or you're doing the play by plays for Smite?
Well, I first started playing Smite back. When I first started playing Smite 1 back in open beta, back in like 2012 or something. I can't remember when.
Hmm. 2010 is when the
And
beta opened, or yeah.
well, ever since then, I've always watched well Smite content creators that that have come and gone,
Hmm.
and and just watching all those guys and learning from them while just enjoying the content was was one of the reasons. But then once I but then later on, after several years break, I it finally came back into Smite. I had a lot of fun with it. I got really good. Then once I got to a pretty good level, I kind of wanted to start doing content, but I didn't think that I was there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a few videos like back in 2024. But during that time, I was also focusing on trying to become a a better player. But then when I looked on YouTube or like stuff online, all the guides, all the informational stuff that that is there for players from but like so many guides and like videos that are there from the content creators, they don't really they don't truly tell you how to get from a a lower rank skill to a higher rank skill,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of made me upset. So once so the moment that I that I finally thought I was actually good enough, since I'm I'm constantly fighting the best players, I have decided try to make as much informational videos to help people out. Yeah, there's well besides from from early on, almost nobody makes any actual good informational videos, and
Right.
that's pretty irritating to see. So I want to help people out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because like we used to have, like Fine OK making the play by plays and like teaching. There was like, very briefly like PBM used to do like kind of support guides, but he never like got like fully invested into it. And then we had a
Hmm.
couple like ADCs and I don't think there was like a real big like mid like play by play like kind of um, teacher, like in a sense, like for content creation. But it's always been like something that's in my opinion, like lacking in Smite. And like, there's always been like decent like teachers, but for the most part, you're big what four streamers right now, big three, big four. They don't really make like how to videos. They might make a god like um, I can't think of the word like what
They pretty
gods are
much only
good.
covered they they only pretty much cover the basics of gods
Mm-hmm.
and the basics of each role, but they never go into to the advanced level,
Yeah,
like the Masters plus level of
yeah.
play.
Or they're just making enjoyable content, or they're just making informative videos, not like teaching though. And
Hmm.
it is very lacking in Smite 2, which is why I decided to do this video and get the knowledge out that like you are making content, and I have really enjoyed your content here in the last like 3 or 4 months that I've been watching it. I think it's been 3 or 4 months, something like that. And then also I have a very like basic like how to play Smite coming out next week, not next week, but
Nice.
next week, and that's going to be covering like what is like Smite at its very core, and like kind of what the game modes are, not necessarily like an in-depth detailed like how to play your role well and how to go from like this like gold or silver up to like scale and continuously get better. um, I went a little bit off script there, but uh and I mean, do you like does anything change whenever like the meta shifts? Like, is there anything like you change in your videos, or do you kind of keep your information, like your teaching, to like a core of what you should be doing?
well, when there's a new meta change or when a new god comes out, I pretty much keep everything the way it is. The only difference is that, or maybe deviate from some video that I had planned and just focus on the new thing that just came out.
Hmm.
And then when I do the video, then I will make a play-by-play on how you should ideally play the character.
Okay. And this is I think this that question actually really flows from our previous conversation, which is thoughts on the Smite ecosystem. Uh, like the Smite creator ecosystem. Do you think it's like maybe like too crowded, or they just get well? I mean, I know that like I feel like Smite 2 specifically doesn't have a lot of content creators. Um, uh, I don't know. Maybe that's a stupid question, but how do you feel about the Smite creator ecosystem?
There's for the way that it is right now. Well, back when Smite 2 dropped, and the layoffs happened back in February, a lot of content creators like Incon quit the game,
Hmm.
and they don't make content for it anymore. So right now it's not in the best state. However, Smite 2 does have a promising future. Playing season 1, and the game becomes revived. Right now would be a pretty okay spot for like smaller creators to maybe try content creation, and if it turns out well for them, then they could keep going. So so right now there are newer content creators coming around, but yeah, it's not in the best situation right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you know, I've started, you know, with my podcast and everything. I definitely want to like, you know, see what I can do. I feel like it's a good time to like learn and kind of grow, and kind of grow with Smite. And so um, I've seen you. I mean, I've talked to you about this before the show, but I've seen you play and coach like most roles. Or not most roles. I've seen you mostly play jungle. And in your recent content, I've seen you play the Scylla aspect in the solo lane. Are there any roles that you don't like to coach? Or more, or um, open to coaching anything?
I'm open to teaching people in every single role. However, I do say that my weakest point is I would say that my weakest point is being a oh, oh my god, I would say that my weakest point is playing tanky solo. Oh my god, I would say my weakest point is playing tanky solo laners, as I find warriors pretty boring, so I never got into that role.
Yeah, I mean,
But
sorry.
it's not like that I play them at a bad level. Is that if I were to teach somebody who's like already masters in the solo lane, there's uh, there's probably not going to be that much I can actually tell them outside of like some macro and it's some team fighting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I were to teach that same person in the jungle, there's a lot more that I can actually get into since that's my main role.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Um, I'm
And that's also
gonna.
why
Sorry,
oh, keep going. Sorry.
I was gonna move on to the next subject, but if you have something to say, I'll let you say it.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
You're good.
I'm gonna roll into asking you a few questions from each roles that might help, like people the I'm losing my mind. Now I'm gonna ask a few questions from each conquest role that may help some of the people that are watching. How do you decide which lane to play around? This is in jungle. Sorry. How do you decide which lane to play around, and how long you should you commit to that lane before that lane that's not ahead? Do I need to rephrase that?
Well, to decide which lane to play around in the jungle, usually you want to look at the enemy team and see. You usually want to see who's on the enemy team and decide for yourself uh, uh, how good is my gank on their. Oh my god! You have to see who's on the enemy team and decide who is my easiest gank. And if I gank them, how well can my teammates follow up? However, but depending on the enemy supports, that's not always the case because if your best gank is the enemy carry, but they have enough Daddy pocket with them, then you usually don't want to gank that lane unless they're really far out of position. So if that's happening, then your best gank would probably be the solo or the mid laner. But if they have Daddy or Kepri, then what's it to the mid lane, then you can't really gank the mid laner. So so that leaves the lane open. And also, just depending on if the enemies have their relics up or not, or they have ults up or not. Because if they have their relic plus ults, and he wants to gank them, then they could potentially save them every single time.
Yeah. I could definitely see, the supports being an issue whenever it comes to ganking. Um, uh, what jungle pathings or farming patterns lead to better pressure? At Wow, I really did a bad job editing this. Um, yeah, what jungle pathing farming patterns like lead to better pressure around, like, gold or pyro or fire giant?
Well, there's two ways to like kind of answer that question, and it's usually from how you start the game. There are like four. There are many different ways to start to start in the jungle, because there's a boost start, which a lot of people do. There's a scorpion start, which some high level players like to do. There's
Mm-hmm.
a speed start, and there's also the there's also the invade start. So depending on the start that you do and the way that you farm the camps, I mean, that's a very vague but it's a very vague question to answer because it's all very situational and who your pick is versus the enemy team's picks. So that so I guess that kind of answers one part of that question. And when you were asking for the Gold Fury and the Pyromancer, ideally you don't want to do the Gold Fury or the Pyromancer if there's a lot of if a lot of your camps are up, because if you and your teammates waste a lot of time on the Gold Fury or the Pyromancer and the enemy team comes to like fight you for it, if you waste time sitting there like fighting them, or they force you off, or they potentially steal it, then that's a bad play because you could not have done that and instead farmed all your camps and then you do it.
Right, because that.
Because if you because if that bad scenario happens, then that's just extra time that you delayed doing your camps, which means it's less golden XP over time.
Right, and that could be like, like not pushing your wave before rotating to the gold fury. That could go like, it could put you at a disadvantage, lose you a tower, or lose farm on the other side of the map if you didn't
Hmm.
have your camps down before you rotated over. And how do high level junglers control team fights without always needing to make like flashy plays?
Ideally, they just wait for the best opportunity to just go in. Now, being able to play a team fight properly is one of the hardest things to do in Smite, since since 5v5 well, the way that a 5v5 team fight can play out is always is always very it can always be very chaotic and ranked, because
Mm-hmm.
not many people are very they're not very organized, but as long as you are you're going on the back line and just doing the job of a jungler, if you can at least apply your damage and just do your job properly, then you are just playing. Then you are already playing correctly. Now, if you want to go for the flashy plays and get like 20 kill games and stuff, then you kind of have to play very selfishly and just play for your KDA specifically, which some players do, and it's not ideal because it can lose you games that way.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you do your job as a jungler, you're fine.
Okay. And I used to watch a buddy of mine play, and he like he was always like a grandmasters or masters player in Smite One, and like I I've always tried to play jungle. I've never been able to like be successful playing jungle. I'm like a mid. Like they see me like, but like I do as much damage as I can, or I'm a support. And I just want to like stand in people's faces. The issue for me in positioning in a team fight, or like with kind of anything, is that like the surprise effect of like having a good gank. Um, uh, I think is really key to playing jungle, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but like how would you set yourself up to have like good positioning going into like really like any situation for a gank, or maybe like a or like team fight position?
Well, typically, most melee characters need to get a good flank angle off and make sure that they're safe while doing it. And you want to make sure that you're unseen going into a team fight, then you can buy a sentry ward. And if there's a fire giant dance going on, or like playing him on the Gold Fury pit, if you can if you can place your sentry ward on one of the flank angles, then you'll know for sure if that spot is warded or not. And if you know that you're not seen on the map, then the better chance of you surprising them, eh, the chance of you surprising them is increased by a lot. Then once, eh, then usually with a normal team draft, like a tank solo, like mage mid, you know the five usual roles. You usually want to wait for your solo laner or your support to to engage on the enemy team, and then when the team fight's happening, you need to decide who the person that you want to go on is, and whether the abilities that they have that you are worried about them using if you go on them, if you see them use it and if you see them use it in a fight, then it's ideal to then go in while they're weak. Now that can be pretty hard, but the more you do it and the more that you practice it, the better you'll be.
Right. So yeah, just trying to make sure you or your team, or you and your team, covering like ward paths, so that way you have a clear like vision. Also, I'm gonna say that like this is kind of lost in Smite 2 compared to Smite 1, in my opinion. I don't play at the higher level of play in Smite 2, but uh, wave control around the map, I think is maybe because the map is bigger in Smite 2 and there's more farm around, or I'm not sure, like there's more like jungle paths. But wave control in Smite 1 around like a fire giant fight is like extremely important. And then like you have, like if you're in fire giant, right, you have your solo lane keeping the wave pushed up so that they don't have free entry into the jungle. And also, like if you have their wave pushed up, then you have more open available routes to get around. So wave control in mid lane and in solo lane are really important to getting around the map and sneaking your way into the fights.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's enough for jungle. Let's move on to mid lane. When is it more valuable to hold pressure in mid versus roaming or making rotations?
Well, for the mid laner, unless you are somebody really fast, like Aladdin, like making rotations and like getting to the other lane quickly, you usually don't want to rotate as a mid laner. Now, if you do rotate as a mid laner, then you just gotta hope that your support or your jungler can can take the wait for you while you're gone, while you're too busy rotating. Because if they don't, if you go to rotate a lane and you get a kill, if you come back to your lane, you would have lost a whole mini wave on the tower if the enemy mid laner stayed. Because if they stayed to clear the wave, that wave that they farm and the wave that you lost, that kill that you got is not worth the wave that you lost. I mean, that's not how. I personally believe that's not how the game should be like.
That's
Because
just because the
kills
map
should
is bigger.
because kills should mean more than just PvE farming.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sadly how it is, and with how big the current map is, many millionaires can't make it to the other lanes in time. So so you pretty much don't want to rotate as a millionaire unless for some reason there's a huge team fight happening to where Gold Fury or Primancer can be pulled by can be pulled by the other team,
Mm-hmm.
then you should help them out.
Right. And then And is there anything that like separates a mid who does damage and a mid that like dictates an entire fight?
There are. I'm kind of confused by that, by the last part of the question. But if you're talking about DPS mages, like a Merlin versus a very deciding mage fight like Raw, then that's eh, then that's basically eh, then that question basically comes down to the difference between those two types of playstyles. Because
Because
a
you,
character like uh, like Merlin, he has a lot of he has a lot of range, a, a lot of DPS, and that's really good for like poke and for like some team fighting.
mhm.
But if a raw can get a good snipe on like two people and like two of the backline, then the backline's basically just out of the fight, and that one single ult can just pretty much dictate the entire fight from there. I, I guess you could say.
Right. So like it just depends on like, what the what pick you're on, and like if you're looking to just poke people and try to get as much, much damage off, and then like then it would, if that was the case, then it would be like your team's job to like, kill people rather than uh rather than like, playing a like one shot character that's trying to hit an ult and like basically win your team the fight. I don't know if that's what I exactly meant with that question, but I think that does kind of answer it.
Yeah.
um so how should mids approach warding and vision um once they get a lead?
If you get a lead and you want to use wards to push your lead even harder, then you usually want to ward. eh, Then you usually want to place deep wards in the jungle. Like if you have the pressure and you know that you're safe, then if you can place a ward at the speed buff, then that's gonna help your team out so much because if you know where their jungler is, then it makes for then it makes because if you know where the enemy jungler is with the deep wards that you can place down, especially one at the speed buff, then your team, if they're paying attention to the map, will know that the jungler's on this side of the map. So the so the t- so the team that's playing on the other side uh, can then push up without much worry.
Right. And then
So you, and what I mean by deep wards is like not only placing it deep in the jungle, but just placing it on the jungle camps, like the red buff with the other ward camps.
right, like a high trafficking area where you well, like that like the jungler is going to rotate to like on
Mm-hmm.
specifically like one side or the other side of the map, so that way you can like have vision. And let me ask the opposite question on how can mids ward and kind of control like vision pressure whenever you're behind.
If you're behind as a millionaire, then that usually means that the other millionaire is either beating you up in the lane, or their support slash junglers helping them beat you up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is happening, then you want to play. Then you want to place the defensive wards. And depending on the enemy team's picks, you might want to place wards inside both of the bushes in the mid lane, like one on the wall, and the other by the gold thing. Because if you're behind and they have characters that can really punish you if you step too close to the bush, then you want to place wards there. Eh, But if you know that they're not in the bushes, then just placing them like off to the side, like where the corridors are, right next to your own tower. Those are good spots too.
Okay. And um, I lost my train of thought again. And I asked, I mean, I kind of asked this same question for jungler whenever it comes to positioning, like, around, I mean, let's just say a firefight or an objective fight in general. Like, where kind of, like, should you be positioned as a mid laner?
Is this a millionaire? As a typical mage, it, or if you play as a mage or a hunter in the mid lane, then you just have to play in the back line right next to your to whoever your carry is. However, a recent popular pick, which is Pele mid, she's around, and there are some assassin mid characters that can be played. However, some of them like sets and Kemosa's are not in the game yet, but whenever they do arrive, those characters should be played. uh, Those those characters in the mid lane should be more positioned like a jungler. However, for the usual mage or hunter pick in the mid lane, you just want to sit in the back and just and stay next to whoever your carry is.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of like, these people that are watching are uh, playing ranked, and often my carry or other or other teammates aren't exactly doing what they should be doing, and that gets a little bit better as you get closer to, like, obsidian and maybe like and higher. But let's say that the ADC is not kind of playing with the team. I guess you just poke as far back as you can, but still trying to get your damage off.
Yeah, most of the time, most people won't be playing ideally. So when it comes to ranked, you just have to play your own game. You just have to play your own life. And even though Smite is a team-based game, in ranked, you should not treat it as such, even in the very highest lobbies, because ranked and casuals, for that matter, are just very chaotic because nobody's really communicating with each other. No one really has any plans. They're just playing to play and just have fun. And if you want to win, you just have to play for yourself.
Yeah, I normally play
Because
with
if you
my.
try to play,
Sorry.
what if you want to play as a team, if you are a good team player in Smite and in Smite ranked, you will actually lose more games than if you were to play entirely for your own tempo and for your own self. As weird as it sounds, but that's kind of how that's kind of how it is if you're not in the support role really.
Yeah, I think um, knowing, like, you know, I think realizing what teammates you can rely on or somewhat rely on. You never want to, like, fully, like, invest into, like, one of your teammates doing something, because stuff that can always go wrong. But I think, like, me for instance, if I am playing mid, right, my jungler is not, like, clearing camps. I'm going to be on those camps as soon as I clear my wave. Like, trying to get my lead, because I know my jungler isn't going to be there to do it. And if they get upset with me, like, I'm sorry, but, like, I have a game to win. And I,
Yeah, if your jungler's not if your jungler's not doing their camps on time, or if they're not doing their camps properly, then you usually want to take some of the back camps or some of the camps. We're not. You usually want to do it when they're not there. Like if they're off on the other side of the map ganking a lane and they just
Hmm.
leave those camps up for so long, then you can take them. However, you should usually avoid doing the speed buff for them. And if you take the speed buff, then then you should get reported for that.
You should get reported for that for sure. I mean, I've definitely stolen my jungler's like speed. You know, I was playing last night, and I was really like I was doing well in mid lane, but my jungler was like constantly in solo lane, but like not farming his speed at all. So I just, I was snagging his speed buff simply because like he wasn't there to like it was sitting there without being cleared for like 2 or 3 minutes at a time, and I was like, all right, I've given up on this guy completely. But I don't know if it was the right play, but I needed to secure my farm. I hit level 20 before anyone else, and I tried my best to win the game. I don't know if I won that one. But let's move on to
If a jungler, wait,
okay.
all right, if a jungler is actually that down bad with their farm, then you should clear the camp for them, but do not take the buff.
Yes. Yes. I left the I think only like in one like team fight like we were like fighting late game that I actually stole the speed buff, but he wasn't there at all, and they were fighting up at a tier 2 on the opposite side of the map, so I just picked it up. But yeah, let's move to support. My bad rank plays. We're not going to talk too much about those. Um, all right, as a support, when do you engage as a support? How do you avoid overcommitting when your team's not ready?
Well, usually as a support, you want to set up for your team or appeal for your team if you're a a backline character. If you're a more frontline support, then you just want to play setup for your team and and when you do that, you have to make sure your teammates are actually behind you and are actually ready with you. Because if you start doing things too early, while your team is not there, then you just get punished for it a lot. But usually, if you're but depending on who your solo lane tank is, you kind of want them to start start the team fight. Like for example, a chalk blink gold can be a a great way to start the fight, and then you can play then you can play front to back really like you do the things you need to do in the front, and then once you do that, you play in the back with the carries and you make sure they don't die.
Right. So, making sure you're engaging and like, you know, while like trying to be as aware as you can about what your teammates are doing, what your teammates have up, like their abilities, and also like what the enemy team's um, abilities are up and down, kind of how close they are, and then engaging, and then falling back to your carries. I know there's a couple supports that play it a little bit differently, like um, Sebek is
Yeah.
more of like your engage character, someone who you like, engage, throw someone back. And I mean, and then whereas like Geb can play both. Like he can either play like hard defense, or he can also be like a hard like um, engage character.
hmm that that kind of just depends on who you play as support.
Mm-hmm.
Because like Kepri or Aphrodite can't really do much in the front line except for if like look for a good root or a good kiss for stun.
Hmm.
But once they do that, then they just have to play back right afterwards.
Right. And Kepri's a really difficult uh for late game at least, I think is more difficult, or like more not difficult isn't the right word. It's different because like, a lot of people are like he's a backline like support. But it really depends on the stage of the game and if you're behind or ahead, because like you can play Kepri very aggressive early and still not be punished for it. But like later you kind of transition to being like this, you want to mitigate damage, but for the most part you're peeling more than like as you get later into the game.
Hmm.
So where was I? As a support, being tanky, how do you manage your vision compared to like another lane, like with your warding um, or like stuff like that?
Well, usually there's not much. Well, usually there's not much. Well, not much difference because the best ward spots for support is just on the objectives,
Hmm.
and that's all you ever really need. However, if you want to, if you are playing from behind, then you can kind of place wards for your teammates like in a defensive manner. Like let's say that your carry's behind in the dueling because you guys lost the 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 early laning phase. If you want to help your your carry out a bit, so then you can place wards for them on the two corridors coming into the lane from the jungle, or the same for their mid lane. But you typically want to just place wards on the objectives to make sure the enemy team's not gonna sneak it from you.
Right. Um, and how do like higher like tier supports track the enemy junglers or carries without face checking and dying?
Well, usually eh, that's not entirely the support's job to do because that's usually the enemy junglers because that's usually the junglers job to help track them down, and the way that you can do that is by was just by having a good sense of macro. Like if you see them gank one lane, i- if you see the enemy jungler gank either side lane, then whatever lane that they that then whatever side lane they gank, you can pretty much assume all the camps on that side of the jungle are down. So that means when they gank your side lane and they kill your side lane, they will most likely back, and then when they back, they'll head to the to the other side of the jungle because they haven't been over there in a while, and that's one simple way to, to sort of check the enemy jungler. And the other is just knowing which camps they're going to, and just looking at the timers of your own camps compared to when they did theirs. It's just it's just constantly looking at the map and just looking where they are and what camps could be up and what they could be doing.
Right. And that makes sense. Because I mean, I've probably thought about that in the past, but that's the really good point of like, if they gank the right lane, for the most part, like, their camps will be up on the other side, and you know, I'm. I mean, that's a lot better point than I think I would have picked up, but um, that, I mean, that might help me out. Um, and I'm gonna ask the same question. Wait, I think we've already talked about like how to position in a team fight because like our first question was you know
Mhm.
engaging, and I think that that basically covers kind of how to position in a team fight. You basically want to engage and then like disengage to like peel for your carries depending, but it all depends on like what character you're playing, um, and that goes with like a lot of things. There's a lot of the moving parts in Smite. But let's move on to carry. Um, when should ADCs rotate to fights, or should they just keep fighting, or is this the same like instance of like mid not wanting to rotate because you're definitely gonna lose your tower against an ADC.
Well, what I said earlier when it comes to mid laners not really wanting to rotate. Now you can usually do that since the since the jungler is usually going to be around the mid lane area, so it's kind of easy for them to cover your lane.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the carry role, you do not want to rotate at all until you're like at least level 17, level 18.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you're close to like full build like late game. And the reason for that is once late game happens, usually your usually your pick in the carry role will be some high DPS character uh, like maybe Medusa, Apollo, Rama.
Mm-hmm.
And since you have so much DPS in your build with those characters, you're extremely important in the late game because without you, usually your teammates are characters that do not have the best DPS against the objectives or structures. So your team needs you to do objectives for them because they can't do it without you as well. And if you rotate before you're close to full build, if you rotate to the mid lane for like a fight or something, and while there's so much farm on the dual side of the map, if you come over to the fight but you don't get anything out of it, maybe one assist, which is like 50 gold and like some amount of XP. Like sure you can maybe help your team out and like do pyromancer or something, but it's usually too risky to do. Whereas if you stay over in the dual lane, you can farm the whole mini wave, you can contest the neutrals with the enemy ADC, and you can get your own buff in the side back camps. So that's the more guaranteed and safer play, which is what most players at the high level would do because the risk reward is way the risk of you rotating and getting something. It, okay, the risk of you rotating and getting a lot compared to losing all the farm on the dual side is way too high to to just ever be worth rotating for.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say.
Okay.
So yeah, just stick to farming your lane, pressure the enemy ADC out, and the only time you want to leave your lane is to like fight in the Gold Fury pit or just pull the Gold Fury whenever you think you can. That's the only time you should ever leave.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, as an ADC, um, you know, in my opinion, I don't play a lot of like ADC, but like I don't feel like I do damage at all until like I hit level 20 and I'm starting to like, kind of shred things. And then like at that point, like, you're doing all the damage. Um, but before that point, like even if like, uh, whether you're behind or ahead, just best to kind of stay in lane and farm because the risks just typically aren't worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to maybe rotate to like Gold Fury or something to try to defend it or whatever, if like the your ADC rotates over, or your opponent rotates over, it's better just to get as much farm on that side of the map as possible, and then maybe rotate to try to defend the Gold Fury. But it's still like kind of risky. So
Mm-hmm.
stick to ADC and clear your waves until you're later in the game. Cool. Um, uh, I don't like either of the questions um, I wrote for this, other than that one. So I'm gonna skip to a question that we've answered for every role, and basically like, how do you position going into fights, and talking about mid lane. It should be about the same as kind of stick with your mid laner, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, for the question, I could actually go a bit of like in depth with some hunter picks. Now, some hunter picks are actually pretty. So when it comes to team fights, just depending on who you pick as a hunter, you just have to play it to that character's advantage. Like for example, if you're Jing Wei and the enemy team dives you, you're a very safe character with your one and your three dash as well as your ult. So she can. So if they dive on her, she's pretty. She's very easy to like save herself from and to get away. Whereas if you're somebody, like Danza whereas if you're somebody like Danza or Artemis, then you can't really get away from them. You kind of have to stay and just fight your ground with the boar or use Dancer Rocket, his three and his two to help fight the enemy team. So it kind of just depends on 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 how your character can play the fights, and if your character needs a if your character needs to just hold the ground and fight, like maybe in and on her, for example, then you kind of want to stick next to your support in your mid laner.
I mean, that makes sense. Um, you know, I think that's why like Smite's a little bit more difficult to like learn and like get better, because like every pick you play is infinitely different from the last pick that you played. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's good on ADC. It's got so let's move on to solo laner. Is there a never mind, never mind, never mind. Uh, how do you go about creating pressure in solo lane to help the rest of your team?
Are you talking? uh, Are you talking about a team fight, or just in the lane, or just both?
Yeah. Let's start from like kind of the beginning. Like how do you go about like uh, I mean, of course, like getting ahead and like like if so, let's say you're on par with the enemy laner, and uh, like how do you start making a difference across the map?
But the problem with solo lane is that a lot of it is kind of matchup dependent. But if you are somewhat staying even with the enemy solo laner, like if it's very stalemated, then then you just kind of have to to plan out fights for like all the farm on the solo side, and if and you also want to focus on like getting less hits on the mini wave, but you can somewhat leverage some pressure. Then you can look to proxy waves. However, however, most solo low lane picks can't really proxy waves that well. But but let's say that you are one pick like maybe Coco can solo since he's pretty popular as a 4 damage character. If you can get a proxy off, then the proxy can help. Okay, when you proxy a lane, if you're if you're in a position to, then it just buys you a lot of time to then check their jungle camps. And you should mainly do this if when you know the junglers on the other side of the map, like maybe fighting like dual lane or like on the dual side of the jungle. Then that's pretty much the only way that you can like sort of apply pressure. If you can proxy the wave and then go check whatever camps are up, like the back camp, wherever, and if you can snag it, then you're fine. But it really just depends on how the matchup is. I guess you could say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so
I kind of deviated. uh, I kind of deviated from the question because you more so asked on if the lanes are even, since you can't really always get a proxy off. And, and I did kind of answer it. If you can control most of the neutral farm, and maybe it take some of the back side camps a bit. If you can do that, as well as play with your jungler to look for to look for a gank or for a blue buff invade, as well as getting less hits on the mini waves, then you can sort of build a solid lead. But outside of that, that's that's all you can really do in a very stalemated matchup.
right, and Smite 2 specifically, we have the teleporters on each side. And now you can't use them until after 10 minutes. Is there any specific like times you look to make a rotation over to the duo lane, or do you mostly just kind of stay and farm as much as you can and stick on your side of the map to secure farm if you know you get an opportunity to still farm?
Well, if you do want to use the teleporter to go gank the dual lane, or to maybe fight for like Gold Fury, then you got to make sure that you shove the mini raven first. You got to make sure the other solo lane is not really around when the waves meet, because if you can clear the wave first, then that'll sort of buy you time to then go look for the rotation. However, ideally you would want to make a rotation if the enemy dual lane's pushed up to your tower, and if they're pushed up to your tower, then that makes it way harder for them to then get back to their own tower for safety. So it's either that, or you should play for when your team's ready to do the Gold Fury. But that's only if you can sort of get the pressure in the solo lane first. Like if they're late to the wave and you clear the wave first before they do, or before they come to the lane, then yeah, you can teleport. But if you, uh, but it sort of falls into the same situation as the other lanes. If you're not getting something out of it, then you're kind of wasting your time. Because if all those side camps are up and you do rotate and you get nothing out of it, then that feels bad. But usually, if a solo laner is already coming over to the dual lane by like 10 minutes, then it's already feeling super bad for the enemy team, for the for the enemy duo.
Yeah, and I had another question. It was, how does your, teleporter from base affect uh like, in Smite 1 we had, teleport relic, which, was always
Mm-hmm.
used or not used depending on the meta, but is there any difference in, having the teleporter to base than using teleport? Because most of the time, whenever you were kind of learning to like rotate in Smite 1, um, which I think rotating might be a little bit less valuable in Smite 2, but is you don't really want to make the rotation if your teleport is down, because you can't get back to base fast, or get back to your lane fast enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing that I kind of overlooked as well.
Um, and how would you go about positioning in team fights? Like we've talked about with the other roles, because solo lane's a little bit different than the other roles.
I kind of gave an example earlier with a support question with Chalk, and that is, if you're playing Chalk, who's a pretty popular solo lane pick because he's very easy to play.
Mm-hmm.
The only real good engage he has in a fight positioning if you is you should look to get a big ult off on the team, but if you're not looking to do that, so then you can't really play up as a frontliner, e- except to just look for like poking with the axe before, because a character like Chalk's pretty safe and he sort of plays more backline. He can't really frontline that well. However, if somebody like Hercules, then he can play very frontline because the enemy team will be very scared of you pluck. And as long as it is up, you you sort of create fake pressure even if you don't plan on using it. It just really depends on what pick you are, and that'll sort of be my answer for many of the other questions that I've answered already. Because a MOBA is always very situational. There's so many different god combinations. There's only and every team fight is different. Every game is different. So it usually depends on the pick you play. Because most full damage solo laners, which are kind of popular too, can't really frontline either. They just have to play more in the backline with the teams. Because a frontlining Kokoken will just get killed every time, for example.
Right. And I guess everyone's just gonna have to watch your videos to find out where exactly you should position depending on your pick, right?
Yeah, but I don't play solo lane that much, so just watch Snatty or solo or troll for that.
Yeah, Solo Troll started to make a little bit more content lately. I was a little excited. Um, but that Scylla video, I did enjoy that. I feel like that pick has to, you have to work so hard to get to where you want to be in late game.
Yeah, that yeah, similar aspect in the solo lane will actually be pretty strong in the next patch because they're buffing it quite a lot
Mm-hmm.
since not many people felt it was really good. But with the build I was using, yeah, you can actually own many games with it. But the only problem is you have to play very scared in the early game,
Mhm.
and if the enemy solo lane is somebody who can really pressure you out and not let you get the farm, then that will feel really bad.
Yeah, and
Because, for
that
example, the Quebecan that I fought in that video, he did not really understand how strong he was against me, which which helped me a lot. But if he really knew the matchup and the damage that it that we both do to each other, he could have pushed his lead really hard onto me. And and as long as and unless my jungler constantly camps him, then he could have built a 1K gold lead on me, for example.
yeah, for sure. But this is ranked, and we're just here to have fun, right? And
Yep.
some people aren't that great at the lanes that they play, but some are. So I think that's all we have for
Yeah, the
for.
one.
Go ahead.
Uh, you you go ahead.
Okay. Um, I think that's all we have for lanes and coaching. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick shout out to Dad's Gaming Esports, proud sponsor of the podcast, promoting mental health and community for gamer dads everywhere. Reminder that our we still have Steam giveaways, Steam code giveaways. Just make sure you join the Discord, and we'll be running away a giveaway very soon. Um, Make sure to give this. I am losing my mind. Um, Subscribe, like, comment for any issues you have with the channel, or anything maybe you would like to see, or critiquing. I mean, I take all kinds of feedback. um I'm you know Today I'm really having a hard time talking about stuff, uh and I wrote down some really bad questions, but we're always looking to grow here. I'm gonna have um, icy IcyCold's information in the description below. It was really nice to have you on. You can go ahead and share um, where to find you on Discord. I mean, not Discord. Where to find? Well, I mean, I guess your Discord. Do you want your Discord posted too?
I don't mind. I do have it posted on every single video that I make on my YouTube.
Okay, and tell everyone where they can find you on Twitch and YouTube. I don't know if you stream.
Yeah, yeah, twitch.tv/IcyColdX on and for YouTube just IcyCold with two Y's, by the way.
Sweet. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. I hope I didn't.
It was a pleasure being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It means a lot. I've been watching your content a lot, and I was very excited whenever you agreed to come in. Um, just a heads up. Next week we're going to have Clog Bean arriving, uh, and so make sure you stay tuned. We're going to go over some very basic stuff about Smite. Again, we have a 500 sub goal, and we're at 9, so we got a long way to go. Um, Thank you all so much for watching. It was a pleasure having you. We'll see you next week. Peace.